I am sitting here in the quiet of my living room, surrounded by the memories that echo through the walls of this house. It's a house I once filled with laughter and love, but now it feels more like a tomb, a place where the silence weighs heavily on my heart. I never imagined that I would end up here, feeling so invisible, so utterly alone. My family, the very people I devoted my life to, seem to have forgotten me. I can't help but wonder how I got to this point. Just yesterday, I overheard my son talking to his wife in the kitchen. I thought they were having a private moment, but I couldn't help but catch snippets of their conversation. He said, "Mom is just a babysitter now. She doesn't really do anything." Those words cut through me like a knife. Just a babysitter? I felt a wave of betrayal wash over me, and I wanted to scream, to tell him that I was so much more than that. I had given him everything, my time, my love, my dreams. And yet, there I was, reduced to a mere title, as if my entire existence was nothing but a role I played. Before I continue, tell me in the comments what city you're watching from. I want to know how far my story reaches. I remember the days when my son was small, when he would run to me with open arms, calling me Mommy with a joy that filled my heart to the brim. I was his world, and he was mine. But time has a way of changing things, doesn't it? As he grew older, I became less of a priority. The demands of his life, his friends, his ambitions took center stage, while I faded into the background. I became the person who was always there, always available, but never truly seen. As I sit here, I reflect on the sacrifices I made for my family. I put my own dreams on hold to ensure that my son had everything he needed. I remember the nights I stayed up late, helping him with his homework, the weekends I spent driving him to soccer practice, and the countless hours I spent listening to him talk about his dreams. I was his biggest cheerleader, yet somehow I became the one who was taken for granted. I think back to my own mother, who was always there but never truly appreciated. I remember the way she would smile through her pain, the way she would hide her tears behind closed doors. I promised myself I would never be like her. I wanted to be the kind of mother who was loved and cherished, not just tolerated. But here I am, in my twilight years, feeling like a ghost in my own home. The truth is, I didn't just lose my son. I lost myself along the way. I poured every ounce of my being into raising him, and in doing so, I neglected my own identity. I became a shadow, a reflection of what I thought a good mother should be. I forgot about my own needs, my own desires. I let the world define me, and now I am left with the remnants of a life that feels unfulfilled. I often wonder if he even knows the sacrifices I made. Does he remember the days I spent working 2 jobs just to make ends meet? The times I skipped meals so he could have a little extra? The dreams I shelved, thinking they would be waiting for me when he was grown? Or has he simply erased those memories, choosing instead to focus on what I didn't do? The silence in this house is deafening. I can hear the clock ticking, each second a reminder of the time that has passed. I long for connection, for understanding, but all I feel is the weight of my son's dismissive words. I want to scream, to shake him and make him see me, to make him feel the pain of my heart. But I know that wouldn't change anything. It would only push him further away. I often find myself sitting in the same spot, watching the world go by outside my window. I see mothers and their children laughing, sharing moments that I once had, and it fills me with a bittersweet longing. I want to be part of that joy again. I want to be seen, to be valued, but instead, I feel like a relic of the past, a forgotten piece of furniture in a room filled with new memories. I think about the conversations I used to have with my son. We would talk for hours about everything and nothing. He would share his dreams, and I would encourage him to chase them. But now, it feels like those conversations are a distant memory, replaced by the mundane exchanges of daily life. I miss the laughter, the connection we once shared. I often wonder if he even realizes what he's lost. Does he understand the depth of my love, the sacrifices I made? Or is he too caught up in his own life to notice? I want to believe that he cares, that deep down he knows the truth. But the way he spoke about me yesterday felt like a dagger to my heart, a reminder of how far apart we've grown. As I sit here, I can't help but feel a sense of urgency. I need to do something to reclaim my identity. I can't let his words define me any longer. I want to show him that I am more than just a babysitter. I am a woman with dreams, with passions, with a life that deserves to be lived. But where do I even begin? How do I bridge the gap that has grown between us? I know I need to confront him, to let him know how his words affected me, but the thought of it terrifies me. What if he dismisses my feelings again? What if he doesn't care? I am left with this overwhelming sense of despair, wondering if it's even worth it. I glance around the room, taking in the photographs that line the walls, pictures of happier times, moments frozen in time that remind me of what we once had. I see my son as a child, his face lit up with joy, and I can't help but feel a pang of nostalgia. I want to go back to those days, to relive the moments when we were inseparable. But I know that's impossible. As I sit here, I realize that I can't keep waiting for him to come to me. I need to take action. I need to find my voice, to stand up for myself. I refuse to be relegated to the sidelines of my own life any longer. I deserve to be seen, to be heard. I deserve to reclaim my identity. And so, I make a decision. I will not let his words define me. I will not be just a babysitter. I will show him the woman I am, the woman I have always been. I will confront him, and I will make him see me. But first, I need to gather my strength. I need to remind myself of who I am, of the woman who fought for her family, who sacrificed everything for love. I need to remember that I am worthy of respect, of love, and of understanding. As the sun sets outside, casting a warm glow over the room, I take a deep breath. I can feel the fire within me igniting, pushing me to take the first step toward reclaiming my voice. I know it won't be easy, but I am ready to face the silence that has surrounded me for far too long. I am ready to tell my son the truth. I am ready to show him that I am more than just a babysitter. I am a mother, a woman, and I deserve to be seen. And with that thought, I feel a glimmer of hope. Perhaps, just perhaps, this is the beginning of a new chapter in my life, a chapter filled with courage, connection, and the love I have always craved. I often find myself reflecting on the moments that shaped my life, moments that have been both a blessing and a burden. It's strange how time can warp our memories, making the painful ones sting a little less while the joyful ones seem to shine brighter. But even now, as I sit in this quiet room filled with echoes of laughter and love, I can't shake the feeling of abandonment that has crept into my heart like a thief in the night. When I think of my son, I remember the day he was born. The world felt like it had shifted on its axis as I held him for the first time. He was so small, so fragile, and I was filled with a sense of purpose I had never known before. I was going to be the best mother I could be. I wanted to shower him with love, to protect him from the harsh realities of the world. But somewhere along the way, that love became a burden, and I became invisible. I poured my heart and soul into raising him, sacrificing my own dreams and desires for his sake. I remember the nights I stayed up late, waiting for him to come home from his late-night escapades, praying he would make the right choices. I remember the countless hours I spent helping him with homework, cheering him on at soccer games, and nurturing his every aspiration. But as he grew older, I noticed a shift. The boy who once clung to my leg, who sought my approval and affection, began to pull away. It was as if I had become a ghost in my own home. I felt like I was living in a shadow, always present but never acknowledged. I tried to reach out, to connect with him, but every attempt was met with indifference. I remember one particularly painful conversation when he was a teenager. I had asked him about his day, eager to hear about his friends and what made him happy. He looked at me with a dismissive glance and said, "Why do you care? You're just my mom." Those words pierced through me like a knife. I had devoted my life to him, and yet, in that moment, I felt like I was nothing more than an obligation. As I sit here now, I wonder how we got to this point. Was it something I did, or perhaps something I failed to do? I replay our conversations in my mind, searching for clues, for answers. The truth is, I had always been there for him, yet it felt like I had failed to truly connect. I had become a caretaker, a provider, but not the confidant he needed. I had lost sight of my own identity in the process. There were moments of joy, of course. I remember his first steps, the way he would giggle as he stumbled across the living room. I remember the day he graduated from high school, the pride swelling in my chest as he walked across that stage. But those moments became overshadowed by the growing distance between us. It was as if I was watching a beautiful painting fade into a dull canvas. I could only stand by and watch as my son grew into a man who seemed to have forgotten who I was. And then came the day I dreaded most. I had invited him over for dinner, hoping to rekindle the warmth we once shared. I spent the entire day preparing his favorite meal, filling the house with the sense of love and nostalgia. I set the table with care, placing his favorite plate at his usual spot. But when he arrived, he seemed distracted, uninterested. I tried to engage him, to draw him into conversation, but he barely looked up from his phone. "Mom, can we just eat? I have plans later," he said, his tone sharp and dismissive. It felt like a slap in the face, but I held my composure, forcing a smile as I served the food. As we ate in silence, I could feel the weight of the unsaid words hanging between us. I wanted to reach out, to tell him how his words cut me, how I felt like a stranger in my own home. But the fear of rejection held me back. And then, in a moment of frustration, I spoke the words that would haunt me. "You know, I'm not just a babysitter. I'm your mother. I've sacrificed so much for you." His response was cold. "Yeah, but that's what you signed up for, right? Just a babysitter, that's all." The pain in his voice echoed in my mind, a reminder of how far apart we had grown. I felt as though my heart had shattered into a million pieces, each fragment a memory of love and sacrifice. In the days that followed, I found myself retreating further into silence. I didn't reach out to him, I didn't call, I let the silence linger, hoping that perhaps he would notice my absence and come to understand the weight of his words. But as the days turned into weeks, I realized that this silence was not just a punishment for him, it was a punishment for me too. I was trapped in a cycle of pain, longing for connection, but too hurt to reach out. I spent hours reflecting on my life, on the choices I made, and the sacrifices I had endured. I had put my dreams on hold to raise him, to be there for him in every way possible. I had given up so much of myself, and yet, here I was, feeling invisible, forgotten. I started to dig through old boxes, searching for pieces of my past that had been buried under the weight of motherhood. I found old photographs, letters, and mementos that reminded me of who I used to be before I became just a babysitter. One day, as I sifted through the memories, I stumbled upon a small, dusty box tucked away in the corner of my closet. It was filled with letters I had written to myself over the years, letters filled with dreams, hopes, and aspirations. I had forgotten about them, but as I read through the words, I felt a spark of recognition. I was reminded of the woman I used to be, the passions I had set aside, and the dreams I had buried deep within me. In those letters, I spoke of traveling the world, of writing stories that would inspire others, of finding joy in the little things. I realized that somewhere along the way, I had lost sight of those dreams. I had become so focused on being a mother that I had forgotten to nurture my own soul. The realization was both liberating and heartbreaking. I had the power to reclaim my identity, to rediscover the woman I had once been. But how could I do that when my relationship with my son felt so fractured? I knew I needed to confront him, to express my feelings, but the fear of rejection loomed large. I could still hear his words echoing in my mind, reminding me of how he saw me. I was terrified of opening old wounds, of facing the truth that had been buried for so long. But I also knew that I could not continue living in this silence, in this state of emotional limbo. I decided to take a leap of faith. I would write him a letter, pouring my heart out onto the page. I would tell him how his words had affected me, how I felt invisible and unappreciated. I would share my journey of self-discovery, of reclaiming my identity, and perhaps, in doing so, I could bridge the gap that had grown between us. As I sat down to write, I felt a mixture of fear and hope. I wanted him to understand that I was more than just a babysitter. I was a woman with dreams, a woman who had sacrificed so much for him. I wanted him to see me, to acknowledge the love I had poured into our relationship. With each word, I poured my heart onto the page, hoping that somehow he would understand. When the letter was complete, I folded it carefully and placed it in an envelope. My hands trembled as I prepared to give it to him. I knew that this was a pivotal moment, a chance to open the door to a conversation we desperately needed. But as I stood at the threshold of that door, I hesitated. What if he'd dismiss it? What if he didn't care? But deep down, I knew I had to try. I had to take the risk. I couldn't let fear dictate my actions any longer. So, with a deep breath, I made my way to his apartment, my heart racing with anticipation and anxiety. As I approached his door, I felt a wave of emotions wash over me. I knocked softly, my heart pounding in my chest. When he opened the door, I saw a flicker of surprise in his eyes. "Mom, what are you doing here?" I took a moment to collect my thoughts, the words I had rehearsed swirling in my mind. "I came to talk to you," I said, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. "I wrote you a letter." His expression shifted from surprise to confusion, but he stepped aside to let me in. As I entered his apartment, I felt the weight of the silence enveloping us once again. I handed him the letter, my heart racing as he took it from me. I watched as he unfolded it, his brow furrowing as he began to read. In that moment, I felt vulnerable, exposed. I had laid my heart bare on that page, and now it was in his hands. I held my breath, waiting for his reaction. Would he understand? Would he finally see me? As he finished reading, I could see the wheels turning in his mind. He looked up at me, his eyes filled with a mixture of emotions, confusion, anger, and perhaps a glimmer of understanding. "Mom, I didn't mean it like that," he said, his voice low. I don't know how to connect with you anymore." The words hung in the air, a bittersweet acknowledgement of the distance that had grown between us. I felt a surge of hope mixed with sadness. We were finally talking, finally addressing the elephant in the room. "I know," I replied softly. "I've been feeling invisible for so long. I just want you to see me, to understand that I'm more than just your mother. I'm a person with dreams and feelings too." He looked down, his expression shifted as if he were grappling with the weight of my words. "I never meant to hurt you, Mom. I guess I've been so caught up in my own life that I forgot to appreciate everything you've done for me." The conversation began to flow, a tentative exploration of our feelings. We spoke of the past, of the moments that had driven us apart, and the love that still lingered beneath the surface. It was a painful yet cathartic exchange as we peeled back the layers of resentment and misunderstanding that had built up over the years. As we talked, I felt a sense of relief wash over me. The silence that had once felt suffocating began to lift, replaced by the warmth of connection. I could see the walls between us slowly crumbling, brick by brick, as we shared our truths. In that moment, I realized that I was no longer just a babysitter. I was a mother, a woman who had fought for her place in the world, and I was reclaiming my identity. I felt a surge of hope as I looked into my son's eyes, knowing that we were beginning to rebuild the bridge that had been broken for far too long. As the conversation drew to a close, I could see a flicker of understanding in his gaze. "I'm sorry for how I treated you, Mom. I promise to do better," he said, his voice filled with sincerity. In that moment, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. I had taken the leap, and it had led to a breakthrough. The silence that had once felt like a prison was now filled with the promise of healing and connection. And as I left his apartment that day, I felt a renewed sense of hope. I had confronted my fears, shared my truth, and opened the door to a new chapter in our relationship. I was no longer just a babysitter. I was a mother, reclaiming her identity, and I was ready to embrace the journey ahead. In the days that followed, I continued to reflect on my own dreams and aspirations. I began to write again, pouring my heart into stories that had long been silenced. I started to rediscover the passions that had been buried beneath the weight of motherhood, and in doing so, I felt a sense of empowerment. I realized that I could be both a mother and a woman with dreams. I could nurture my relationship with my son while also nurturing my own soul. The two were not mutually exclusive, and I was determined to find a balance. As time went on, I noticed a shift in our relationship. My son began to reach out more, asking about my day and sharing his own experiences. We laughed together, reminisced about the past, and slowly began to rebuild the bond that had been strained for so long. I could see the love in his eyes, the understanding that had blossomed from our conversations. It was as if a light had been turned on, illuminating the path ahead. We were no longer just mother and son. We were two individuals learning to navigate the complexities of life together. And as I continued to write, to embrace my own identity, I felt a sense of fulfillment that had eluded me for years. I was no longer defined by my role as a mother. I was a woman with a voice, with stories to tell, and with dreams to pursue. In that journey of self-discovery, I found strength in vulnerability. I learned that it was okay to express my feelings, to share my struggles, and to seek connection. I had discovered a new sense of purpose, one that allowed me to embrace both my role as a mother and my identity as an individual. As I reflect on this journey, I can't help but feel grateful for the silence that once enveloped me. It was in that silence that I found my voice, that I learned to confront my fears, and that I began to reclaim my identity. And so, as I share my story with you, I hope that it resonates. I hope that it serves as a reminder that we are all worthy of love, connection, and understanding. We are not defined by our roles. We are defined by our courage to embrace our truth and to seek the connections that nourish our souls. If my story touched you, subscribe to the channel and share it so more people never give up on hope. As I sat in the quiet of my living room, the weight of my son's words hung in the air like a heavy fog. Just a babysitter. Those words echoed in my mind, punctuated by the silence that followed. It felt as if the walls themselves were closing in on me, reminding me of all the moments I had sacrificed for my family, all the dreams I had set aside in the name of motherhood. I had given everything, and yet, in his eyes, I was reduced to a mere caretaker, someone whose worth was measured only by the time spent watching over his children. In that moment, I felt a surge of emotion rising within me. Anger, yes, but more than that, a profound sadness that washed over me like a cold wave. I had spent years nurturing him, shaping him into the man he was today. And yet, here I was, stripped of my identity, my essence. I was not just a babysitter. I was a woman who had lived, loved, and lost. I was a mother who had dreams and aspirations that extended beyond the walls of our home. I pushed those thoughts aside, unwilling to let despair take hold. Instead, I stood up and walked to the small desk in the corner of the room. Dust had gathered on the surface, a testament to the years I had neglected my own passions. I opened a drawer and pulled out a stack of old notebooks, their pages yellowed with age. As I flipped through them, memories flooded back, stories I had written in my youth, filled with hope and imagination. I remembered the thrill of creation, the joy of weaving words into narratives that transported me to different worlds. I had always dreamed of being a writer, of sharing my stories with the world, but life had taken me on a different path. I had become a mother, and while I cherished that role, I had lost sight of who I was beyond it. With trembling hands, I picked up a pen and began to write. Each stroke of the pen felt like a release, a way to reclaim the pieces of myself I had buried beneath layers of obligation and sacrifice. I wrote about my dreams, my fears, and the love I held for my son, even amidst the hurt. I poured my heart onto the pages, allowing the ink to capture the essence of my soul. As the days turned into weeks, I found solace in writing. It became a sanctuary where I could explore my emotions without judgment. I wrote about the joy of motherhood, the laughter shared over family dinners, and the bittersweet memories of watching my son grow. But I also wrote about the loneliness, the moments when I felt invisible, and the longing for recognition and understanding. I began to share snippets of my writing with my son, hoping to bridge the gap that had formed between us. I would leave the pages on the kitchen table, small invitations for him to step into my world, to see me not just as his mother, but as a woman with a story worth telling. At first, he seemed hesitant, skimming through the words without much interest, but slowly I noticed a change. One evening, as I was cleaning up after dinner, he picked up one of my notebooks and began to read aloud. His voice filled the room, and I could hear the emotion in his tone as he spoke the words I had poured my heart into. I watched as he became engrossed in the stories, his expression shifting from indifference to curiosity. "Mom, I didn't know you felt this way," he said, looking up from the page. The surprise in his voice was palpable, and for the first time, I felt seen. It was a small breakthrough, but it filled me with hope. Over the next few weeks, we began to have deeper conversations. I shared more of my writing with him, and he started to open up about his own life, his struggles, his dreams, and the pressures he faced as a father and a husband. It was as if the act of sharing my words had created a bridge between us, allowing us to connect in ways we hadn't been able to before. One afternoon, as we sat together on the porch, watching the sun dip below the horizon, he turned to me with a serious expression. "Mom, I'm sorry for what I said before," he said, his voice filled with sincerity. "I didn't mean it. I've been so wrapped up in my own life that I didn't realize how much you've done for me. You're not just a babysitter, you're my mom, and you've always been there for me." Tears welled in my eyes as his words washed over me. It was a moment of redemption, a moment where the silence that had once suffocated our relationship began to lift. I reached out and took his hand, feeling the warmth of connection between us. "Thank you for saying that," I replied, my voice trembling. "I've always wanted you to see me for who I am, not just as your mother." As we continued to talk, I felt a sense of healing begin to take root. The years of neglect and misunderstanding were still there, but now they were accompanied by a newfound understanding and appreciation. We began to share more than just our words. We shared our hearts, our vulnerabilities, and our hopes for the future. One day, while rummaging through some old boxes in the attic, I stumbled upon a dusty photo album. As I flipped through the pages, I came across pictures from my youth, images of me laughing with friends, pursuing my dreams, and living life with passion. It struck me that I had allowed the years to overshadow those moments, to cloud my identity. I took the album downstairs and showed it to my son. "Look at this," I said, pointing to a picture of myself at a writing competition. This was me, before all the responsibilities. I had dreams, just like you do now. He studied the pictures, his brow furrowing in thought. "You were so young," he said, a hint of awe in his voice. "I never knew you were so adventurous." I smiled, feeling a sense of pride swell within me. I still am, in my own way. It's just that life took me on a different journey. As we continued to explore the album together, we talked about our dreams and aspirations. I encouraged him to pursue his passions, to never lose sight of who he was, just as I was learning to do the same. The more we shared, the more I realized how important it was to embrace our stories, both the beautiful and the painful. We were not defined by our roles, but by the experiences that shaped us. And in that realization, I found strength. As the weeks passed, our relationship blossomed. My son began to take an active interest in my writing, even suggesting that I share my stories online. "You have so much to say, Mom. People need to hear your voice," he encouraged. At first, I hesitated, unsure if I was ready to share my truth with the world. What if they didn't understand? What if my words fell flat? But then I thought about the silence that had once enveloped me, the isolation I had felt for so long. I realized that sharing my story could be a way to connect with others who might feel the same way. With my son's support, I began to publish my writing online. I created a blog where I shared my stories, my reflections, and my journey of self-discovery. I poured my heart into each post, inviting readers to join me on this path of healing and understanding. To my surprise, the response was overwhelmingly positive. People began to reach out, sharing their own stories of struggle, resilience, and hope. I felt a sense of community forming, a space where we could all come together to support one another. With every comment and message, I felt the silence that had once suffocated me begin to dissipate. I was no longer just a babysitter. I was a storyteller, a woman reclaiming her voice. But amidst this newfound connection, I still carried the weight of my son's initial words. I wanted to understand why he had dismissed me so easily, why he had failed to see the depth of my being. So I sat him down one evening, ready to delve deeper into the heart of our relationship. "Can we talk about what happened that day?" I asked, my voice steady but gentle. He looked at me, a flicker of apprehension in his eyes. "What do you mean?" "When you called me just a babysitter, it hurt, and I want to understand why," I replied, my heart racing. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I guess I was just overwhelmed. Life has been hectic, and I've been struggling to balance everything. I didn't mean to diminish you or your role. I was just frustrated." His honesty struck a chord within me. "I understand that, but it's important for you to recognize the impact of your words. I've always been here for you, and I want you to see me as more than just a caretaker." He nodded, his eyes reflecting a mix of regret and understanding. "I'm sorry, Mom. I didn't realize how much my words affected you. I promise to be more mindful." In that moment, I felt a sense of closure wash over me. We were learning, growing, and evolving together. The silence that had once defined our relationship was being replaced by open communication and understanding. As the months went by, our bond continued to strengthen. I found joy in sharing my writing with him, and he began to share his own creative pursuits as well. We would sit together, exchanging ideas and encouraging each other to chase our dreams. One evening, as we watched the sunset from the porch, I turned to him with a smile. "You know, I never imagined we would come this far," I said, my heart full. He chuckled, a lightness in his voice. "Neither did I, but I'm glad we did. You're not just my mom, you're my friend, and I appreciate you." Tears filled my eyes as I realized how far we had come. The journey had not been easy, but it had been worth it. We had faced our fears, confronted our past, and emerged stronger on the other side. And as I continued to write and share my story, I felt a sense of purpose that I had longed for. I was no longer defined by my role as a mother. I was a woman with a voice, with stories to tell, and with dreams to pursue. In the quiet moments of reflection, I often thought about the silence that had once enveloped me. It was a silence born of misunderstanding and neglect, but it had also been a catalyst for growth. I had learned to embrace my truth, to share my voice, and to connect with others in ways I had never imagined. As I look towards the future, I feel a renewed sense of hope. I know that life will continue to present challenges, but I also know that I am not alone. I have my son by my side, and together we are navigating the complexities of life, love, and self-discovery. If my story touched you, subscribe to the channel and share it so more people never give up on hope.